Let us continue with the life of Padmasambhava. Yesterday we were discussing the place called Drāmiḍa. The first subjugation there had already been accomplished. Once, when the master was staying in a town, he saw many mantra-dharinas leading away and eating some human beings of Jambudvapa. They were eating everyone up. When we talk about Dākīns and mantra-dharins, some of them are actually quite good, while others are not so good. So there are many different classifications of Dākīns. In the biography of Dākini Munso, these various categories are explained in great detail. You can read it for yourselves. From what we can see, not all Dākīns are necessarily enlightened masters. Nowadays, in the Tibetan region, people often recognize this person or that person as a Dākini. However, you should know that not all Dākinis are necessarily good. In the biography, Tulku Tenzin analyzes so many types of Dākīns. Trying to figure out who is good and who is bad can leave you a bit confused. Because there are so many of them, Dākinas are not always entirely good. Of course, there are also many excellent Dākinas among them. Then Guru Rinpoche went into a cave and set up a Wrathful Mandala. Through this, all the Dākinas were summoned and bound to come by his power. Guru Rinpoche summoned them into the Mandala. He then subjugated them with terrifying manifestations. They were so frightened that they'd like to escape. Those flesh-eating Dākins were about to run away. So Guru Rinpoche took his kila daggers and pierced them into their limbs. From that time forward, they vowed never to harm the people of Jambudvipa again. In fact, many Dharma protectors made their vows back then. For us as practitioners, carrying a kila dagger with us is very helpful. We might not possess the incredible power of Guru Rinpoche, but relying on such an auspicious object is still very important. This is especially true if you practice the Vajrakilaya Gurukukma. I personally feel that this is essential because in this age of degeneration, demonic forces and obstacles are quite rampant. We really need something to protect ourselves. I remember during our previous retreats, everyone chanted the mantra of the Vajrakilaya Gurukukma. Because this mantra holds inconceivable merit and spiritual power, these sacred objects also possess great energy. Malicious spirits and ghosts dare not come close when you carry these objects. Therefore, although it is merely a physical form, but with these forms, it is still important for us to carry such protective objects. It is very beneficial. So back then, those Dākinas made a vow, promising never to harm the people of Jambudvipa again. Guru Rinpoche then guided them to generate bodhicitta and told them to keep their vows. This marks his second successful subjugation. On another occasion, Guru Rinpoche arrived at an inn. There he saw a group of women. They were boiling water in many different pots. When Guru Rinpoche went to take a look, he discovered that some of their water turned into blood, some turned into grease and fat, some turned into sperm, some turned into human flesh, some turned into melted butter, some turned into molasses, some turned into porridge, and some turned into beer and other substances. They appeared in all kinds of different forms. This is just like how we, beings of the 6 realms, perceive a bowl of water in completely different ways. Then Guru Rinpoche asked them, "What is going on here?" Since they did not recognize Guru Rinpoche, they answered him honestly, "We have summoned and extracted the vital essence from the bodies of people in Jambudvipa, as well as the nutritional essence from their food." You see, this is also mentioned in the Kshitigarbha Sutra. Among spirits and ghosts, there is a specific type that specializes in sucking people's vital essence. So sometimes we see certain patients who are still physically alive, but when you look at them, it looks like their vitality has been sucked away by spirits. They look so frail and pitiful. Indeed, whether we look at the Kshitigarbha Sutra or many other sacred scriptures, it is true that certain spirits can take away people's vital essence, the various essences of the human body, as well as the nourishment contained in food. Look at the nourishment contained in grains and crops. Once it has all been absorbed by them, the food is left with no real nourishment at all. Nowadays, modern nutritional science keeps marketing health supplements. But as for the nutrients inside these health products, if they have all been entirely sucked away by spirits, then you are left with nothing but an empty shell. No matter how beautifully packaged it is, it won't necessarily be beneficial. Sometimes these things are hard to say for sure, but the power of dependent origination is truly inconceivable. We humans are also subject to having our energy drained like this at times. Guru Rinpoche then rebuked them at that time. Didn't you take an oath before Guru Padmasambhava? Didn't you swear an oath? Even though he was Padmasambhava himself, he intentionally said to them, didn't you take an oath in front of Guru Padmasambhava? Didn't you make a vow? They answered back and replied, our mistress took an oath, but we did not swear anything ourselves. They actually tried to debate him using pramana logic. They claimed that they merely attended the gathering, and since only their mistress made the vow, just like the case we mentioned earlier, right? Yes, the mistress took an oath, but they believed they never gave their own word. Therefore, they felt completely free to do whatever they pleased. So Guru Padmasambhava returned to the same cave as before. By relying on a mandala, he summoned all the leaders and retinue of the mantradharins. It is said that 1.2 million spirits and non-human beings appeared. Our Dharma protectors, like other spirits and non-human beings, each have countless retinues. For instance, take Palden Lamo. She is known to have 100,000 retinues. Her retinue includes 100,000 Dākinīs. This is the case with deities such as Palden Lamo. Therefore, many of the spirits and non-human beings at that time were similar in this regard. They also had retinues numbering around 1.2 million, with an extraordinarily large number of retinues. It is said that those spirits and non-human beings at that time had such vast numbers of retinues. Then Guru Padmasambhava demanded and received their vitality mantras and their means of propitiation. All the mantradharins entered the mandala. He commanded them to do so. Regarding this act of entering the mandala, remember what we discussed earlier yesterday. At that time, Dākini Yeshe Tsogyal and another Dākini were fully qualified consorts, so they entered through the mandala. But in this case, these spirits also entered the mandala, even though their intentions were initially not very pure. Thus, Guru Padmasambhava had to subjugate them. He made all the retinues generate bodhicitta and bound them by oath to protect their vows. This marks the third subjugation. And in fact, when we look at some accounts, such as the travel records of a merchant named Suleiman, who traveled to China and India, we find some interesting descriptions in his writings. He wrote that there were many people living on certain remote islands at that time. Many traditional texts describe these places as the Rakshasa continent, saying that they were inhabited by non-humans and Rakshasis who ate outsiders. But some of them may actually have been indigenous peoples of those islands, because whenever they saw people coming from outside, they would often capture and eat them, even drinking their blood. Even in more recent history, explorers and navigators traveling to different places were sometimes killed and eaten by island natives. They may have regarded these outsiders as dangerous, or simply seen them as prey to be hunted and consumed. So in reality, the so-called Rakshasa continent may simply have been inhabited by human beings, but maybe they were portrayed as non-human beings who ate people. This is similar to how many Africans were taken to Europe and America and were treated as slaves to be exploited. If you look at various history books written by different authors, they describe explorers encountering indigenous peoples in places such as Sri Lanka, the Indian Ocean, and various islands in the Pacific Ocean, who appeared to be savage and violent. That could well be the case here. If you look at various history books written by different authors, they describe how explorers found indigenous tribes around Sri Lanka, the Indian Ocean, and certain islands in the Pacific Ocean. They encountered indigenous peoples and viewed them as uncivilized and savage. Consider what happened to the people in Africa. When Portuguese ships first arrived in Africa, the people from those regions of the West were initially welcomed by the local people. The Africans treated them with great kindness. But later they returned with weapons and seized vast amounts of African territories. When we look at what happened on the African continent, the cruelty of some human behavior is truly terrifying. This is especially true of colonial powers such as the Netherlands and Britain, whose colonial actions in Africa were severe. Just as Gendon Chopel warned, We must be extremely careful around these red-haired people of the monkey caste. His words mean that we should remain cautious around them. Once you look at what happened there, you can understand why. Even today, Western powers continue to occupy and exploit those regions of Africa to a considerable extent. So I wonder how that place Guru Padmasambhava visited back then has changed over the years. Regardless, what we see here is the successful completion of the third subjugation. In fact, over in Drāmiḍa, Guru Padmasambhava conducted 3 full subjugations. The dependent origination there was very auspicious, and the local spirits and deities basically all took refuge in the Dharma. But in the Tibetan region, only 2 of the 3 subjugations were completed. The final one was left unfinished, and perhaps this is why various difficulties and obstacles later arose in Tibetan region. In Drāmiḍa, Guru Padmasambhava also subdued the Yaksa, Rakshasas, and evil Naga. The protector deity of Drāmiḍa's king was a violent and malicious preta called Varpate. He served as the personal shoulder protector deity of the local king. This refers to what we call the Drala, or shoulder deities. Every person has a white shoulder deity on their right side and a black shoulder deity on their left side. Everyone is protected by these 2 guardian spirits. Once Guru Padmasambhava became aware of this, he realized that if he could tame and guide the king, the protector would naturally be tamed at the same time. Consequently, the Buddha Dharma would surely flourish, and all sentient beings would find peace and happiness. Therefore, Guru Padmasambhava settled in a forest near the king's palace. So Guru Padmasambhava moved to another place and stayed near the king's palace. By using the power of his meditative concentration, he repeatedly summoned the king's queens to serve as consorts for offering to the Mandala. When the king realized that his queens were missing, he disguised himself as an ordinary person and secretly followed them. In the end, he saw them gathering around Guru Padmasambhava. Those queens, having been summoned by the Guru's power, gathered around him. The next morning, the king became furious. He led a massive army, bearing all sorts of weapons, and advanced to attack Guru Padmasambhava. However, Guru Padmasambhava was completely unharmed by their assault. Instead, he threw down wrathful mustard seeds at them. Mustard seeds are extremely tiny, even smaller than sesame seeds. They are a substance used to dispel demons. Every time we recite a wrathful ritual and visualize the protection wheel, we use these mustard seeds. They serve as a primary material for wrathful subjugation. The consecrated seeds instantly burned away the armor and weapons of the king and his followers. Furthermore, these attackers began bleeding from their limbs and their bodies grew stiff. They became speechless and thoroughly confused. They remained paralyzed in this terrible state for 3 days, until they were all on the verge of death. At that moment, they prayed and supplicated the Master. Guru Padmasambhava began to cleanse them with water from his ritual vase. Instantly, they were completely restored to health. After the king and his entire retinue prostrated at Guru Padmasambhava's feet, they said they would do whatever the Master said, at which he commanded. They established the victory banner of the Buddha Dharma and invited learned teachers from Magadha, located in central India. They invited masters of the Vinaya, another of Sutra, and yet another to teach the Abhidharma. He had 3 temples built called Bida, Arda, and Sudha. Among these 3 great monasteries, one was called Sudha. The name Sudha sounds similar to our Seda. Our academy was also established over there. I wonder if any ruins of these places still exist today. Perhaps they do. Guru Padmasambhava performed the consecration rituals for these monasteries. This laid the foundation for teaching and practicing the Tripitaka. While staying in this land, Guru Rinpoche did not teach much of the Sutrayana path. Instead, he bestowed a vast number of pith instructions upon the king and his followers. These were pith instructions of secret mantra. To 6 fortunate students, he explained the 6 tantras. Moreover, he gave extensive teachings on the completion stage and the practices of the 4 activities: pacifying, enriching, magnetizing, and subjugating. All of these 6 close disciples gained accomplishment. They built about 5 smaller temples in various locations. It is said that these temples were all completed at the exact same time. Guru Padmasambhava lived in this place for about 12 years. As you can see, he spent 12 years in Drāmiḍa. Finally, using his Dharma robes for wings, he lifted into the sky, departing for Kamara in the southwest, the island of the Rakshasas. Regarding our Tibetan region, as we mentioned yesterday, there's a tradition saying that he flew to the Rakshasas from Gontang Lato. However, some historical accounts say that he flew directly from Drāmiḍa to the Rakshasa land. So there are different accounts about this. The great Master Taranatha suggested that these 12 years should actually be counted by taking 6 months as 1 year. If that is true, Guru Rinpoche stayed in Drāmiḍa for at least 6 years. There are different historical accounts of this, so everyone can also refer to other historical sources for further analysis and study. All right, we will stop here for today.
Mandala Padmasambhava Mandala Padmasambhava